joining us. This is our second community talk sponsored by Fort Lee Public Schools in collaboration with GOMO Educational Services. Tonight, we are really excited to have Clifton J. Thompson join us as our presenter. He will be delivering a presentation titled Introduction to Equity. Just to give some background on Clifton, he began his 25-year career in education as a teacher in the New York City public school system. In New York, he taught middle school age students who had been retained multiple times. And he recognized that his students' academic success was built upon a foundation of mutual respect they had with him. After being a classroom teacher for 9 years, Clifton became an administrator and has held various roles in elementary, middle, and high schools. Clifton earned his bachelor's degree in sociology from Hampton University in Virginia and a master's degree in urban education with a specialization in administration and supervision from New Jersey City University. Clifton resides in northern New Jersey with his family and is proud of his 2 children. And he has many other accolades that hopefully you read in the bio that we shared in our flyer. So without further ado, I will hand over control to Clifton. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for having me. I don't know, it's not in the bio, but I grew up in Inglewood, right down the road. And so I was able to play sports growing up against young people from Fort Lee when I was a young person. So this is like a coming home event. Feels good to be in Bergen County virtually, which is good. So tonight's conversation is Introduction to Equity Conversations. And the big part about that is understanding that we're all in the same place when it comes to equity. Even though I may be a facilitator of these conversations, I may do PD, I have not testified in court, so I do not consider myself an expert. We can learn from each other, and we all make mistakes and we all grow. And so part of that is becoming comfortable with making those mistakes, with not knowing, with asking questions, with making the place safe for each other. And I will do that by sharing a story. In the very beginning, I was doing a conference, and in the conference, we had a group of students that were panelists, and they were talking about their classroom experiences as minoritized students in high-level classes. And so the panelists consisted of 5 students, 2 Black, 2 Latino, and 1 white. And as the students started talking about their experiences, things were, talking about what it felt like to talk about the antebellum period, slavery, as a Black student and one of the only Black students in, say, an AP class, and being looked at for the answers of how Black folks might feel. Or if you're talking about immigration and being a Latino student and being looked at as if you would have be scared to talk about the topic and what that would feel. And so then young white lady student talked about how she felt alone in her classes, and I was looking at her going, what is she talking about? Why? And I immediately recognized that I was wrong in my thought, but I couldn't figure out, 1, what triggered me to feel that way, 2, why I was wrong in my thought, but 3, how I was going to get out of it. How was I going to consciously make myself leave that behind? Because I had to understand this young person. So I ran to the person that was putting on the conference, and I said, hey, you need to help me now. And he said, what happened? So I told him what happened. And he said, oh, that's easy. Don't worry about it. I said, well, easily fix it. And he said, your problem is you were looking at her through your lens. You weren't looking at her experience and how she saw the world through her lens. If you see it how she saw the world through her lens, she enters spaces and sits in spaces sometimes as the only one for her. And that's real for her, and that's how you have to take it. And immediately I was happy because I understood what he was saying, but I was open to the understanding. I was open to asking for the help. I was open because of the work to recognizing that I wasn't alone. Someone else felt the same way, but I was going to be the one to ask for help and get out of it. And so what are the norms? One, if we're doing this as an interactive workshop, which it isn't tonight, we would one have to be comfortable with having these conversations. We call them courageous because you have to be courageous to put yourself sometimes out there in a space where you're not sure how people are going to respond to your thoughts, your beliefs, your understanding or lack of understanding. But we must do it in order to make things better for our students. Actively listen. Don't listen to come up with your rebuttal for what's going on. Don't listen to come up with how things should be, how things were, but to understand perspective, and that there's many perspectives, and that many times we're saying the same things. We have the same concerns. We have the same fears. We have the same issues, but we have to take the time to listen to each other. And if we were able to do, I would ask to raise your hand. I understand that the chat is activated. So if you have something you would like to ask, or when I ask you to participate, please put in the chat. It makes it easier on me. I'm begging so that it's just not me talking to a screen, but there is some kind of back and forth. And then be mindful and respect another's perspective or point of view, because that is who they are. And that's what the work is about for our teachers, for our students. And it does start with the community. So the objective is participants will become comfortable with having equity conversations. Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologize. I'm supposed to be sharing my screen. Let me do that right now. And I believe you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. Just so at GOMO you can see, there were slides for GOMO. That is me. And this would have been the second slide, but now we're objective. And so you can become more reflective. You can think about what's going on. So in that moment at the conference, I was reflecting on what I was thinking. I was reflecting on what triggered me and where we were. And that's what has to happen in order for us to, we'll learn this, to overcome some of our beliefs that we didn't realize we had, because we didn't actively take on those beliefs. They were beliefs that we found, that were given to us, that were stored in our brains through observation, through learning, through repetition. So I want you to become comfortable with having these conversations, with saying what you have to say, with recognizing that everyone, again, and I'm gonna say this over and over again, everyone has something that they can grow upon and that may not be right or that they don't understand. So you shouldn't be embarrassed about it. So this is one of the old descriptions of equity versus equality. So when we think about equality, it's, oh, should I have the same that someone else has? And if we look at the picture over here on our left, we notice that if we have the same number of boxes, then there's two people at least that can't even pick the fruit from that tree. But if we add boxes as needed, yes, the taller person only has one, doesn't have 3 boxes, but he's able to, or she's able to pick the fruit from the tree, or they're able to pick the fruit from the tree. That's equity. It's giving people what they need in order to achieve that goal. Now, this description does not talk about justice, and there's always more to it, or other things that we can get into. But right now, we're just talking about equality and equity. And so equity is meeting the needs of all students. When I grew up in Inglewood in the 70s and 80s, school for me was wonderful. I had teachers, my family had been in Inglewood since 1902 with my great-grandmother. So my family had gone to Dwight Morrow High School, and their friends and have come back to teach. And so when I was in school, I felt valued, I felt cared for. So for me, I had everything I needed, but my friends weren't always in that situation. Not everyone received what they needed while in Inglewood Public Schools. And so what can be for one person isn't the same for all. And what we want is it to be something that is the same for all students as far as what they need. And so different people talk about different things as far as what equity means, how you achieve it. And you'll see here, Gloria Ladson Buildings talks about culturally relevant teaching. And some people might say CRT, which is confusing because we hear CRT, critical race theory, and culturally relevant teaching have the same acronym. They are not the same, but culturally relevant teaching is about academic success. It's to have students and teachers develop and maintain a level of cultural competence, meaning if you are a minoritized student, you don't have to give up your cultural norms in order to fit in order to be welcome, in order to belong in the school, in the classroom. You can come in as you are and who you are and expect to receive a quality education and be able to achieve at a high level. And it challenges the status quo. And by challenging the status quo, if we think back, like I said, Inglewood was great for me. Keeping the status quo for me would have been wonderful. For students like me, would have been fine. But what about the students that needed a little more? What did we have to challenge for them to do better? Enid Lee talks about altering current practices and perspectives to have equitable learning outcomes for all social groups. So not just the kid whose mother went to college, whose father went to college, but for the kid whose parents didn't think about college, who may not know how to help them academically. How do we help them achieve all that they want to achieve? Because I was a student of someone who went to college, but my mother, one generation before, was not. I learned through stories that in Inglewood, she wasn't necessarily given all that she needed. She took a lot of what she needed. How much energy did she take and expend as a young person taking what she needed? So we have to have the adults altering current practices. Richard Milner. We can often talk about this achievement gap, and we talk about between white, Black, and brown students, but there can be a gap within groups, genders, and how do we make sure we don't have those gaps? How do we make sure we don't know where the gaps are going to be, how things are not going to be predictable? And Glenn Singleton talks about narrowing the gap, raising performance for everyone, but eliminating predictability and disproportionality. And so in many of these definitions or work, you'll see race, because many places those gaps occur in race, but the gaps can occur anywhere. And students can have difficulty in their learning based upon any identity. And so we have to do that. We have to change that. And then Eddie Fergus talks about using the experiences of our students, using their cultural backgrounds, using their knowledge, their information, in order to raise the expectations of all students. Because if we talk about equity work, we're talking about creating windows and mirrors for all of our students. And what do we mean by windows and mirrors? That means allowing students to see themselves in the curriculum, a mirror. You can see someone that looks like you, that thinks like you, that talks like you, that has your experiences. But then windows, you can see the lives of others, not just your own. You can learn about someone else's experience. You can learn about someone else's cultural norms. You can learn about someone else's life within the town that you live in. And so teachers can use that in order to increase their classroom outputs. So equity, as far as what I do by trade as an educator, is about classroom, teaching and learning, and student achievement. So even when you talk about equity, and you'll hear people talking about belonging, a sense of belonging, It's great for all our students to belong and feel like they belong. But we want them not only to belong, we want them to achieve at high levels, at levels that are above what they expect. We want them to go into whatever post-secondary place well prepared. So whether that's college, trade school, military, entrepreneurship, whatever it is, they're prepared to do what it takes in order to be successful. And many times that means learning how to learn, learning how to ask questions, learning how to work as a team. Those things have to be instilled. There was a professor at Harvard University who noticed that Black students in the math program were not doing as well as all other races. And so he started asking questions of his colleagues. And they were saying, well, you know, that's just the Black students. They just don't do as well. And he said, that I can't accept that. One, we're talking about in major. So these are math students in major aren't doing as well in this algebra. That's a problem. We're also talking about Harvard students. So they all did well in high school. They all scored exceptionally high on the SAT. Pretty much all of them had perfect scores in math. However, the Black students are not doing as well. And what he found out was some of it was cultural, not cognitive, cultural. Many times, Black students who perform extremely well are told how special they are. And they don't learn to work or study in groups. They're able to independently learn what they need. And so the other students at Harvard were using study groups, and they were working in study groups, and their grades were good. So the next semester, the professor made part of his syllabus was that all students had to not only join a study group, but attend the study group. And that semester, the Black students performed just as well as all other students. He didn't lower expectations. He didn't decrease what was being taught. He just looked at the students as cognitively being equal to all the other students and saying there must be something else going on that's causing them not to perform as well. And when he found out with study groups, implemented those study groups, and they did as well. So what can we do in the classroom to help improve teaching and learning? What can we do to make our students feel like they belong in a way that improves student achievement? One of the things we can do is talk about their name. So my name is Clifton J. Thompson III. I'm named after my father and grandfather, and it was something that I cherished growing up to the point that I knew I was going by I'm Little Jerry. My father was Big Jerry. And so I didn't know how that was going to work when I had a son. I decided he couldn't be the fourth because when I was little, I didn't know how to give my name. You'd ask me my name and I would say, And then I would get the look of, oh, poor thing, doesn't know his name. But that's because in school, I was Clifton. With family, I was Jerry or Little Jerry. So if we met in the supermarket, it wasn't school, it wasn't home, I don't know what to tell you my name is. Where do you fit? And so I would say, and then decide which one. I didn't want my son to have to do that, so I named him Clifton Jeremiah. I felt like it was a strong name. He could go by Clifton or Jeremiah, same place, and it'd be fine. Well, his sister couldn't say either one, so she called him JJ. So growing up, he became Clifton, Jeremiah, JJ, and his aunt decided he would also be Rib Tip. And so my son never had a problem with telling you his name. He would say whatever came out of his mouth. But one day we're in the barbershop and an older gentleman walks in and I'm in the chair and he says, Little Jerry. And I said, yes. And after that haircut, my son said, Daddy, I wish I could be Little Jerry. And I said, well, you can be. He said, nope, my name is Jeremiah. I said, well, you can go by Little Jerry now. He said, nope. I said, okay, well, you can be Little Cliff. He said, no, you don't call yourself Cliff. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go to work tomorrow. And from this point on, I will either be Clifton or Cliff. And now he is Little Cliff. He's 6'2", 340-pound nose guard at Central Connecticut State University. And he called my girlfriend to thank her for some stuff. And he says, Miss Michelle, this is Little Cliff. And I'm looking at him going, yeah, okay. But that's the power of a name. And so we ask our teachers, learn your students' names. Don't shorten their names. Don't come up with nicknames, because if we asked you about your name, there's a story behind it. Even if it's something as simple as, my mother really liked it. That's a wonderful thing. You're called something your mother really liked, or you're named after someone, or there's a tradition that you're named after the last person who passed away. There's a tradition that you're named after your mother's father or your mother's mother. There's a tradition, and you feel a certain way. So let's call our students by their names. Let's find out where those names come from, and let's not try to correct them. When I was a first-year teacher, I had a young lady, and her name was Anastasia. Her name was spelled Annataiza. So I instinctively said, because I was taught well in Englewood Public Schools, that's Anastasia. She said, no, Mr. Thompson, my name is Anastasia. I said, oh, well, sweetheart, I'm going to call the registrar so that we can put the S in your name on the register. She said, no, there's no S in my name. And me being the young, out of college, first-year teacher, knowing everything there is to know, quickly said, oh, no, there has to be an S in your name for this. She said, there's no S in my name. And my mother said, my name is Anastasia. I said, quickly, without knowing any equity, anything, I do not want to fight with a 13-year-old girl. They are possibly the toughest human beings on earth. Her name is going to be Anastasia, and that's how we'll keep it. And I learned later on that that was the right thing to do. What your students tell you their name is, call them by that. You don't know what their going on is, what they mean, how it means to them. That's what they want to be called. We can do that. So that's one of the things, if I do this work with teachers, that we talk about. Learn their names, don't shorten it. It means something to them. What's the real you? What does that mean? We have these interests. We have friends, and our friends have similar interests to us. We have people that we like to be around. What is it in you that makes you want to be around someone? What is it in you that attracts people? What is it in you that becomes attracted to people? Where do you like to be, and what do you like to do? We would talk about those things and hopefully understand that at certain stages in life, we all like to do about the same things. What did you like to do when you were in elementary school? Ride bike, play outside, play on the playground, read books, talk with my friends, laugh, look at the sky, daydream. What did you like to do in high school? Those things might have changed from elementary school. What did your friends do while you were in high school? About those same things. And so you learn that what makes you you and what makes you like things have to do with sometimes your beliefs and your identities. And there's the big 8, your race or ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your physical appearance, your national origin, socioeconomic status, first language, your age, your religious or spiritual affiliation. These things many times define who we are, what we think, how we see the world, who we socialize with, who we get information from. And because of these things, we develop beliefs that sometimes we act upon without thinking. And later on, we'll talk about implicit bias. But these beliefs do that. However, Other people's beliefs sometimes impact us, because I would say you take one of these things into every situation. Every situation, we carry one of those things. And so we're going to try to do a chat. If you would put in the chat, if you can, let's see how this works. Let's hold our fingers. Which identity of the 8 do you take with you everywhere you go? Whether you're at work, playing with friends, and yes, I said playing with friends, as if we're not adults, but whether you're at work, out, and I can't expand my, okay, there we go. Which identity do you take with you wherever you are? I'm trying to get to full screen. Please excuse me, because I can't see the chat. Okay, here we go.
Clifton, I can assist with the chat if you'd like.
Yeah, okay. I found
Just
it.
let me.
So
Okay.
Proud daughter of an educated Bayesian and Jamaican immigrants. That you take with you everywhere. So if you walk into a situation and some, excuse me, that was the answer given by a colleague that I worked with. So I apologize for the chuckle and the smile, but when you see people that you have an affinity for, you can't help but smile. She takes that with her everywhere. She's proud of it. If something aligns with that, goes with it, and that is what we want. But we have to understand our students do the same. They take that with them everywhere. And so we have to make sure we don't say anything that's going to disrupt that in our classrooms. We have to make sure our students don't have those things to disrupt them. And so let's be aware of what these are and how they do impact our classroom or your student's classroom. So then we would talk about this. Who do you walk in the room and what is your identity? And it's always with you. I am very aware of my maleness and my Black maleness when I go into situations, because there are beliefs that people have that could make interactions more difficult. So I try not to be loud. I try to make sure I smile, regardless of what I say. And I've been told you shouldn't have to do that. Yes, I shouldn't have to. I should be able to go into a space and be who I am, authentically me, all the time. But authentically me, luckily, is a smile and a positive demeanor and trying to be happy. So I'm lucky that that happens to be who I am, and it combats those maybe negative stereotypes. But we should be able to walk into any room as we are. And that means as students should be able to walk into any room as they are. And sometimes this sexual orientation, when we get really upset about it, in a current district I'm in, they had a pride celebration at the intermediate school. And the first time I went to it, I was wondering myself, even as the director of equity for that district, exactly what was going on. How was this? What was it about? And what I learned was the students are part of different communities and have identities because they have what? Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents. And if that grandparent or that aunt or that sibling is part of any community, the LGBTQIA plus community, then those kids are. It's not that they've made a decision one way or the other about anything. But if as an educator, if as an adult in the school community, you say something negative, how does that kid feel? Because they love who makes them a part of that community. And also, that is a part of this with the equity work. So we have to make sure our students feel like they belong here, wherever here is. They have to feel like what they're doing matters, that they matter, and that the people that like them matter. There was a time in my career where we would really push going to college, really, really push it to the point of saying, almost, if you're not trying to go to college, that's a problem. Well, guess what? There's people whose parents haven't gone to college. What are we saying then when we say you have to go to college in order to be successful? Are you saying my parents aren't successful? No, they take care of me. I have these nice sneakers on because of them. My parents work hard. So we have to be careful about what we say. We have to be mindful about what we say, because what do we believe as a school community? This is my favorite quote in education. We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do this. Whether we do it or not must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we have not done so far. Dr. Ron Edmonds recognized that there are predictable gaps in the education for certain students. And so the work we're doing with equity is to rid our system of those predictable gaps, of learning how to look at certain things in a way that doesn't speak to a difference cognitively, a difference morally, a difference behaviorally, other than 9-year-old child, other than student that needs help, student that needs support. We have to look at things that way, like that Harvard teacher did, professor did, saying, no, it can't be Black students are here at Harvard and just can't do well. Something else is going on. Let's find out what the else is going on, and let's feel bad that we haven't done it so far. But it's not feel bad, hide it. It's feel bad, okay, let's do it tomorrow. Let's start tomorrow. And so Dr. Bruce Lipton, I would show the video, no need. He talks about how our beliefs are developed. He says our brains are like computer programs, and the information we see from conception to about 7 years old is just jammed into our brains and our surroundings. And so sometimes when we talk about this equity conversation, why is it so hard? It's hard because we learn that we don't talk about race. We don't talk about sexual orientation. We don't talk about socioeconomics, and we don't talk about religion in public places. We don't talk about those things in mixed company. So if that's part of what we were learning, if that's part of what's in our brain from the time from conception until 7, now we're adults and someone is saying, this guy Clifton is saying, no, we need to have those conversations so that students in our school system can do better. It goes against what we say. And then we realize, oh, I have a subconscious belief that was given to me, my implicit bias. You'll hear about implicit bias a little later. And I'm going to go fast. Wow, time flies. We'll hear about implicit bias later, but we all have this implicit bias. Why do we have implicit bias? Because I'm 50. I was born in 1972. But that 50 means I'm as close to now as I was as somebody that was born in 1922. It's vastly different being born in 1922 than it was 72. But I was raised by a lady that was born in 1921 and a man that was born in 1915 because they watched me while my mother was at work. And some of the things that were given to me, belief-wise, who doesn't work now? Some of the things that were said, I can't say them now. But those two people, for me, were the salt of the earth. And I get chills and get choked up talking about them because they would give me and have given me their last. So to say that one of them maybe had a belief that was negative, that one of them thought something and believed something that is absolutely wrong now could hurt, other than to realize they would have grown if they could. They were so great that if they could, they would have changed. And that happens all the time. And so don't go into the work worrying about what grandma would have said, or what grandpa would have said, or what this sports franchise owner did. We have to believe that everyone can grow. We can grow, we can change for the better. And so that's what this work is about. And so we have to understand that we can be purposeful in our thinking. Don't just act on our implicit bias, because then we'll have these blind spots. And blind spots are beliefs you don't realize you have unless you focus on them. I'm in Myrtle Beach. I parked the car. I'm walking back across the parking lot, and walking towards me are 3 tall white men with leather vests on, bald heads, and big beards. They look skinheadish to me, and it's just me, and it's night. And I do not believe that in South Carolina, they are going to like walking by me in the parking lot at night. And I'm ready. I'm ready to get beat up. I'm ready to get talked about. I'm ready to hear nasty things said to me. And what I got was, hey, it's a beautiful night, isn't it? And I went, yeah. They were like, have a good evening. And I said, you too. And the rest of the way back to the hotel, I beat myself up because I did to someone what I wouldn't want done to me. But I had to be open to recognizing I had a blind spot for that. And I need to check my other blind spots. And so what we'll do is I'll send a link to this tomorrow so that your district can have the blind spots. But if you YouTube it, it's just blind spots and it'll come up. We have to work on that because as teachers, we have blind spots. What do we think about the kid that comes to school in the wintertime that's walking to school and doesn't have a coat? Do we think something different than the kid that gets dropped off and has a coat and has all the supplies? What do we think about them? How do we treat them? How do we create assignments? So let's check our blind spots, because that implicit bias was done to us. We don't control it unless we're purposeful in our thoughts. But it creates other things. What was also done to us is color blindness. We were taught, if you're of a certain age, that color blindness is a good thing because we got it from Dr. King. Content of your character, not the color of your skin. But he wasn't really talking about color blindness. He was saying, we recognize that we come and have different experiences in this world, whether it's the United States or our nation of origin. We have different experiences, and we have different experiences in the mall. How I'm greeted may be different than how someone's greeted. How I'm watched may be different. And I'm not saying I'm watched more closely. I'm at an age and size that they know I'm not grabbing anything and running out. So I might not be watched much at all because he's not going to get far. Whereas someone else may, regardless of race. So we have to make sure that when I come into the room or come for an interview or teach your child, understand that I do come with some experiences that say Black male. I do come with some privileges of Black male. I do come with some privileges of size. I do come with privileges of mother was this and father was that they had gone to college. But I also come with some things that weren't that good, but I don't want them to be overlooked. I want them to be looked at. But with that, I have identity blindness. Gender. We can't pretend that we can have evening events in the winter when it gets dark at 5 and not provide safe passage for maybe the female caregivers that come to those events. How I feel at night walking down the street is probably vastly different than how a woman would feel on that same block. And so we have to make sure that we're not doing any type of blindness. We recognize, we plan, we make sure, because there's other things like microaggressions come out of that blindness. What are microaggressions? Microaggressions would be if someone said, Clifton, you're very articulate. Well, why shouldn't I be? Right? I think Diane said, I've been an educator for over 25 years. I have several degrees. We would think that I should be able to speak eloquently because it's what I do for a living, right? But to say it means, didn't expect that of you. Well, you don't know me, so what did you look at? I did look at your color, but I looked at the negative of it. And I said, maybe cognitively, he should be speaking a different way. Not in this setting. Somewhere else, you might hear different things. When I was in the stands while my daughter was playing soccer and people said negative things, trust me, I did not sound like this in response. So we have to make sure that we don't do that. Looking at someone who's different, hair texture, and thinking we can touch it. Our librarian does a book read competition in like March, April. And the class that reads the most books gets to decide how she does her hair. And this class decided that they wanted her to have rainbow colors in her hair. And so the librarian is a white woman, and she got her hair braided in box braids with different color extensions, and it looked great. But she recognized, well, she didn't recognize, what started happening was people in public started touching her hair. As a white woman, that never happened before. But because it was in box braids and it was colors, people just felt they could touch her hair and get in her space. And she said, I don't know how Black women put up with this. I've heard about it, but experiencing it was something traumatizing. Why would someone think they could touch you in the supermarket? And so that's a microaggression, is when our implicit bias, our thinking that something else is foreign, is different, because my hair texture, my skin color, my size, my shape, my tone is how things should be. My family composition, mother, father, is how things should be. When we have students that have two mommies, two daddies, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, they're all how things should be, because what should be is love. And so let's not ask, well, how do you do this? Or what happens? And what happens is affinity bias. That means we are attracted to people like us. Whether that means athletes, whether that means people who read books, whether that means people who like cars, whether that means other Black folks, other white folks, other Latinos, whatever that is, other Asians, whatever that is, we were attracted to that because that's who we are. Well, sometimes in this affinity and this equity work, we talk about expand yourself. Go to a movie that you wouldn't go to. Go to a festival that you normally wouldn't go to, because it's not about who you are. It's about learning something different. And you'll find that those other things that you like, there's people of those races do too. Confirmatory bias, associated bias, is when we only see what we believe. In our schools, we think Black boys are very aggressive, so we're ready to write up and refer them. But if it's a white boy, it's just boys will be boys, and they don't get written up. So what happens is the referrals for Black boys is high, and so we say, see, the number of times they were referred was a lot, but we don't recognize that because of our bias, we didn't write up the other kids that were doing the same things. And so we have to work on that. And we do, in the work, we have vignettes, we have role plays so that people can talk about it. Because what we need to do is recognize that our beliefs and our blind spots either stop or help children from growing. Because what we want is that little person to look in the mirror all the time and see something powerful. We want them to see that they can be the best they can be with whatever they come to us as, with whoever they are, with however they dress, with whatever they want to do. When I was young, girls just, started playing sports, and now the NCAA women's tournament was viewed more than the men's tournament. That is awesome. I have an 82-year-old godmother who says, I sure wish I came along now. When I was in school, I was good. I was tough. I was fast. I know I would have gotten a college scholarship, but it was frowned upon. And so what we want is to create a world where my 82-year-old godmother could have seen herself as a powerful female athlete. We want our kids to see themselves as powerful in whatever it is because the people in the school believe they're powerful, like the people in Inglewood thought about me when I was a kid. And so what we have to do is understand that a lie doesn't become the truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by the majority. And many times those things aren't accepted by the majority. It's accepted by a loud, small group of people that make the majority think it is. We have to do what's best for our students. And what's best for our students, actually, we have to do what's best for adults, because our students actually get it. They accept each other. They're friends with each other. They learn from us, and then sometimes that changes. So we have to learn from them and change who we are and what we think, so they can have the best learning experience possible, so that if they want to go on to college, to trade school, to the military, become entrepreneurs, or find their way doing something else that's positive for their communities, they have the ability to do that because they were taught how to learn at a high level. And so if I can get to where I need to stop sharing screen, I will. All right, Diane, are you able to stop me from sharing screen? So I don't even have like my mute buttons. I have oh, wait. I think I stopped share. I found it.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I hope those of you that took the time to come out and have a listen, I hope it was worth your while. Again, I would love to do this where we actually get to interact with each other and I can see you, because that's what it's about. It's about having that communication and talking and recognizing, again, for this work, for our teachers, this work is not about the politics of finding out who may or may not be an ally or a racist or anti-racist. The work is really about making our classroom spaces places where students really want to learn. Are there any questions that anyone has? We can go in the chat and
Don't see any raised hands, and you can see the chat, so.
all right. Also, so part of equity work, and I'm gonna use all the time. Part of equity work is we look at equity work through numbers. So we look at the numbers to find disparities, and we ask ourselves, does that disparity cause a social justice issue? Meaning, are there more students of one demographic in our higher level classes? Do our higher level classes not have students from a particular demographic? And does that cause an issue? Yes. GPA wise, if you're in honors or AP classes, usually get more quality points. And so therefore you have a better GPA. A better GPA, if you do choose to go to college, you're eligible for more merit scholarship. More merit scholarship means less student loan on your tuition. Less student loan means less to pay back when you get out. And so instead of paying back $30,000 to student loans, you can save the $30,000, have a down payment on somewhere to live, so you're now out of your parents' basement and off your couch. So we're looking at that as a social justice. Do those numbers show that there's something going on culturally or belief-wise in our system? To use that Harvard example, the professors, with the exception of one, just said it's the Black students. It's nothing we're doing. We're Harvard. We're good. It's the Black students. It was taking us to look at our beliefs. It was taking them to look at their beliefs, their blind spots, and say, no, it's not our Black students. It's something we're doing and finding it out. So that is the equity work. It's looking for disparity. If you don't have any, wonderful. It's looking at do we have a culture for something and finding out where it is, and then because it creates a social justice issue. Also, the equity work into leadership is in human resources. How do we interview? What questions do we ask? How do we debrief about who we interview? What do we say? And so equity work, DEI work in a school district is not a silo. It's not an addition to, it encompasses everyone. What stories do we read in schools? What books do we have? What characters are there? And so how are we changing those percentages? How do we make sure we have heroes and heroines of all races and ethnicities and religions? How do we handle winter recess, December? How do we handle winter recess? How do we handle Halloween? How do we handle Thanksgiving? Do we introduce the religions of other students so that our students know that there's something called, say, Diwali or the Eid? Do we have that? Do we have those moments? Do we spend all of December coloring candy canes and Christmas trees and making sure that everyone knows that it's not holiday break, it's Christmas break? In some communities, that's fine. In others that are very diverse, it's not. So I'm in a group, and in my district, it definitely says winter recess. Another school district, I was looking for something on their calendar, and their calendar says Christmas break. That works for their community, but I'd be willing to bet there are some people in their community that don't celebrate Christmas. How do you feel when that happens? What does that mean? And is it difficult just to say winter break so that everyone feels included? Probably not, but those are the things we have to think about, look at, because we want the experience of our families to be a community experience. And when it is a real community experience, you'd be surprised what happens. I was the principal in Patterson of an academy high school, and it was the highest performing school at the time. While I was there, for the years I was there, we won a Perkins Award for how our students performed. And we had a high percentage of Muslim students. And at winter break, I got all of these gifts. And when I looked at who the gifts came from, the majority of my Christmas gifts came from my Muslim families. They assumed that I celebrated Christmas. They did not. They understood that we give gifts at the time. And so they showed appreciation for keeping their children safe and gave me these wonderful, like when I say wonderful, wonderful gifts. Well, we also didn't go heavy into Christmas celebration because of our student population, but we respected them so much that they respected what they thought I was. During National Honor Society, we're practicing, I'm shaking students' hands, and a young lady says, "Mr. Thompson, please tonight don't shake my hand. It's against our culture for you to shake my hand, and I don't want my father acting up." I said, "Okay, well, I got to do something." So I bowed to her. And when I bowed to her, all the Black girls, "We want you to bow to us too. We don't want you to shake our hand either." I said, "That's not against your culture." They said, "It is tonight." But it was because they felt like that was something cool and they wanted it. And so when we share with each other and cross cultural lines openly, we find commonality, we find humanity, and we do what's best for students. And so again, thank you for having me this evening. I'm willing and would love to come back at any time, in person, virtually, and be in Bergen County.
Thank you so much, Clifton. Fort Lee Public Schools is definitely, and the Board of Education has made a commitment to equity and to continue to engage in these conversations. So we were really happy to have you and have you present to our community. For those of you that are still with us, thank you so much for your participation. And we will be talking about our next steps. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I see the expertise.